White nurse screamed when a black man entered ICU. 3 minutes later, he saved her son. What happens when a Harvard-trained doctor rushes to save a child's life, only to be met with screams, security, and suspension? You won't believe how his calm defiance shook the entire hospital system from ICU to the boardroom. Dr. Malik Evans wasn't a saint. He wasn't trying to be a martyr. He wasn't interested in anyone's sympathy. He was a black man in a white coat, a symbol that, in some buildings, meant less than nothing. Scratch that. In some places, that coat didn't make you look like a doctor. It made you look like a problem dressed like a doctor. And once people decided you were a problem, it didn't matter what degrees you had hanging on your wall or how many lives you had saved. It was Monday. Of course it was Monday. His coffee tasted like a war crime, like someone brewed it in a sock that had been dipped in mouthwash and regret. But he drank it. He always did. Because being a black man in medicine meant staying alert, staying sharp, staying 2 steps ahead of the whispers behind your back. His tablet lit up with 4 emergency calls before 8:15 a.m. Business as usual. Boston's St. Paul Hospital was known for one thing: chaos. Organized, clinical, polite chaos, where paperwork traveled faster than gurneys, and you better have backup for every decision you made. Malik didn't just survive that system, he thrived in it. 10 years of dodging red tape, racial landmines, and microaggressions disguised as protocol. Harvard trained, multiple peer-reviewed publications, and a national award for neurosurgery that he had tucked in a drawer because, well, who really cared? And yet that morning, Malik made the one mistake the system couldn't process. He showed up to help. The doors to the ICU swung open like they always did. Whisper quiet, automatic, unbothered. The hallway beyond was sterile in that high-gloss, antiseptic way that made you feel like you were walking through a lab experiment. Malik's shoes barely made a sound as he stepped through. He wasn't rushing, but he wasn't strolling either. He had that calm, laser-eyed focus of someone who'd been doing this so long that emergencies no longer got to him until the people did. Tablet in hand, badge on chest, Dr. Malik Evans, MD, consultant neurosurgeon. Face tired but composed. His target, an 8-year-old boy, unconscious with suspected cranial swelling. Urgency wasn't a suggestion. It was in the numbers blinking on his screen. And that's when everything fell apart. He opened the door to room 12C, took one step in, and the scream hit him like a slap across the soul. "Stop! Security!" The voice didn't tremble. It was sharp, rehearsed, reflexive. The kind of scream someone uses when they know that their fear, real or not, will be validated because of who they are, or more accurately, because of who you are. The nurse stood near the bed, white, blonde, senior RN. Her badge read Julianne Harding, but her expression read, "I don't care what that says. You don't belong here." Her hand clutched the IV pole like it was a weapon, her eyes wide but focused. "Who is he? He's not on our shift. Where's his access card?" Malik didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. But he did what black professionals across America are trained to do since birth. He proved himself. He raised his badge calmly to eye level. Not pleading, not defensive, just facts. Dr. Malik Evans, neurosurgeon, called in for Luca Harding. I have orders from the chief, electronic signature included. He turned the tablet around. Crisp, clinical, nothing vague, nothing ambiguous, but none of it seemed to reach her. She didn't blink. Her mouth was pressed into a line so thin it looked like she was biting back every protest society never taught her to say out loud. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. She said, I was startled. He came in so fast, I didn't know." Didn't know what? That he was human. Didn't know if I was, what, a threat with a stethoscope? Malik asked, voice steady. Or maybe you mistook my Harvard degree for a forged ID. The tension was cut only by the arrival of 2 hospital security officers, summoned like backup in a hostage situation. One older, bored-looking. The other, young, tight haircut, straight back, ready to enforce whatever version of the rules fit the moment. "What's going on here?" "I'm the surgeon. Here are the orders," Malik said again, his patience wearing thinner than the latex gloves still in his pocket. They looked at the screen, looked at the badge, looked at each other. For a moment, logic won. The young one stepped back, but the moment was lost, because that's when the machine started screaming. The child's vitals, erratic, loud, urgent. Julianne froze. "He's crashing," she shouted, but her feet didn't move. Her instincts weren't to act. They were still watching Malik, as if waiting to see whether he would harm or heal. Malik didn't wait. He was at the bed in 2 strides, eyes flicking across the monitors, hands already assessing cranial pressure patterns, pupils, oxygenation. He's swelling. We need mannitol. Besh milliliter Dordangestat. I'm not sure we have it, Julianne stammered. Then step aside. He grabbed the dose himself, administered it, controlled, certain, unshaken. For the next 2 minutes, no one moved. The boy's vitals stabilized. The storm passed. And still, no applause, no gratitude, just silence. Malik looked up, not angry, just done. Well, he said to no one in particular, would you look at that? Black doctor walks into a room, doesn't rob anyone, doesn't ruin anything, just saves a white kid's life. Somebody call Hollywood. I smell a limited series. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. They just watched him like a strange bird that flew in through the wrong window. Julianne left without a word. The security guards faded into the hallway. And Malik? He walked out slow. Not defeated, just heavy. Later, out behind the loading dock, he stood with his sleeves rolled up, eyes on the skyline. He didn't smoke. Never had. But he needed air. Space. Stillness. He asked himself, what if I had waited? What if I had stood there, proving myself, while that child died? They would have called it a tragedy, an unfortunate delay. They would have whispered about protocol, safety, following the rules. And he would have been the problem again. Always the problem. He headed back inside, checked his messages. There it was. Subject, meeting request, chief of staff. Malik didn't sigh. He didn't flinch. He just smiled. Of course. Next step, the office upstairs. Walking into Dr. Garrett Hale's office felt like trespassing in a museum dedicated to regrets nobody ever voiced. Mahogany walls bathed in stale air, a leather swivel chair that had seen more browbeaten egos than patients, a massive oak desk piled with dusty medical tomes no one had opened in decades, as though knowledge itself had been locked away in tribute to institutional inertia. Behind them on the wall hung a glossy photo of Hale shaking hands with the hospital president, both flashing perfect smiles that could have served as press stills after burying somebody's career and celebrating the coup. Malik Evans stepped in without knocking, because after the circus that morning, after being treated like a criminal rather than a lifesaver, he already knew. In this building, permission was given by skin color, not by medical credentials. Dr. Evans, Hale began, rolling a pen in his fingers, like a lifeline to inner composure. We have a situation. A situation? Malik asked, leaning casually against the wall, arms folded, giving every inch the aura of someone who'd been underestimated one too many times. You call the fact that someone holding a Harvard neurosurgery degree was mistaken for a tablet-clutching intruder a situation? Hale coughed, awkward. He knew there was nothing to defend, but defense was his job. We have received several complaints. Complaints? Complaints that I saved a boy's life without asking permission from Nurse Harding? Or that I failed to apologize for my presence in the room? Dr. Evans, Hale tried to steady his tone. I do not deny that your actions were effective, but your methods, they might have been perceived as a threat, Malik interjected. Exactly, especially if methods consist of my skin, the firmness of my voice, and the refusal to wait for consent to save a life. Hale fell silent. He hated being made to feel human by someone under his rank, someone he'd quite possibly already written off. Therefore, he finally exhaled, voice soft but final, we have made the decision to place you on temporary suspension, pending the internal investigation. Internal, as if the system investigating itself had ever felt any urgency beyond self-preservation. Cozy. Wonderful, Malik said, offering a slow, dry smile. So next time, I'll just stand by the door while white nurses catch their breath. And maybe the kid lives. If we're lucky. He left without waiting for a reply. The door closed behind him, not with rage, but with dignity. That evening, Malik perched in a corner booth at the old cafe on the corner of Roxbury and Main. The walls were peeling. The air smelled like yesterday's grease. The waitress called everyone honey or sweetheart, but the coffee was real, bold, black, biting like memory. He scrolled through news headlines on his tablet until he saw the one he'd been dreading. Black doctors suspended after alarming behavior in ICU incident. They even chose the photo carefully, his face in grayscale, furrowed brow, no context, as if he hadn't resuscitated a child, as if he'd been cursing someone through surgical clamps. He snapped a screenshot and immediately emailed it to his mother. 3 minutes later, her reply, "You don't have to put up with this for their comfort. I am proud of you, but for God's sake, take care of yourself." He didn't respond. Instead, he switched his phone to Do Not Disturb. Meanwhile, across town, in a softly lit private room with crisp white sheets, 8-year-old Luca Harding stirred awake. His father, Dr. Walter Harding, an anesthesiologist and widower, sat at his bedside, eyes locked on the monitors, exhaustion shadowing every pore. "Papa," the boy rasped. "I'm here," Walter whispered, leaning in. "You're safe now." "He was a real doctor?" Luca asked, voice small. Walter squeezed his son's hand, his eyes damp but steady. "More real than most people walking past our wards." That same night, Walter Harding dialed the hospital's chief of staff. No greetings, no courtesies. He launched straight in. "I demand that Dr. Evans be reinstated to care for my son, or we file a formal complaint and leave." "Sir, you must understand. The situation is complex," began Dr. Grayson. "Complex? Number simple. He saved my child, and you suspended him because one white nurse had a God complex and panicked. Do you think this city lacks lawyers?" Silence. And somewhere in that silence, the hospital's thick veil of comfort cracked. Meanwhile, Malik stepped outside into the sultry night. The city pulsed with hushed whispers, not words but glances. He felt every pair of eyes tracing him, not as Dr. Evans, but as that one, the one they saw on the news as a controversy. Teenagers passed by. One recognized him. "Hey, weren't you in the news? That white nurse accused you." One of them laughed. He paused, turning to the kid. "Yeah, and if I'd waited outside that door, like they wanted me to, I'd have you watching a funeral broadcast tonight." The kid fell silent. Malik kept walking. The next morning, he woke to a call from an unfamiliar number. A female voice, crisp and direct. "Dr. Evans, this is Elaine Marcus, attorney. The Harding family has retained me to file a complaint on their behalf. But first, we'd like to give you the platform. There's a press conference today. You have a chance to speak. Would you like to address it yourself, or shall we do it for you?" Malik paused. Then he replied, measured, "I'll speak for myself. Only one thing. Honestly." Suddenly, the entire script, his career, his reputation, his voice, shifted. But in the eye of the storm, Malik remained steady. He wasn't waiting for an apology. He was waiting to flip the narrative. He didn't need permission. He needed the truth, and he was ready to deliver it. 14:02. The press conference started late. Of course it did, because in institutions like this, where apologies are timed and justice is optional, nothing ever happens until someone's life breaks open like a warning bell no one wanted to hear. The cameras clicked like distant thunder. Reporters leaned into each other, whispering notes behind half-raised recorders. And the white-collar crowd, they sat stiffly in the front rows, tight-lipped, backs straight, as if someone was about to rearrange their universe, and they felt it coming in their bones. Dr. Garrett Hale walked out first. He looked like he was about to choke on the microphone. Eyes darting to the sides, he clutched the podium like a man giving his own eulogy. His smile was flat, pulled too tight at the corners. The kind people wear at family funerals when they realize they're expected to speak kindly about someone who made life hell. "Ladies and gentlemen of the public," he began, checking his notes as if the truth needed citation. "St. Paul Medical Center is conducting a thorough internal investigation into the incident involving Dr. Malik Evans, our respected neurosurgical consultant." Respected. Yesterday, the same people were labeling him a threat. Today, he was respected. Just like that. It always happened like this. When the people started paying attention, suddenly the system learned a new vocabulary. "We acknowledge," Hale continued, "that the situation in the intensive care unit was emotionally charged. However, Dr. Evans's actions were," he hesitated. You could see the word he wanted to say, bubbling just behind his corporate fear. "Heroic." But it stuck in his throat like a splinter. So he downgraded. "Effective." Effective. Like an aspirin. Like a sponge. Like something that worked but wasn't supposed to draw attention. Behind the stage, Malik listened. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't shaking. But his body carried a stillness that only came from battle. The kind where the scars weren't visible, but the pain knew your name. He was calm, sure. But it was the kind of calm that comes before you cut into someone's brain, knowing the scalpel's dull, and you're the only one who noticed. A stagehand gave him the signal. His turn. He stepped into the light, not in a lab coat, not in a blazer, not dressed for medicine or for war, just a plain gray turtleneck, steady shoes, eyes sharp. Because this wasn't about titles. This was about truth, and truth didn't need credentials. "My name is Malik Evans," he began, voice calm but cutting through the room like a scalpel through scar tissue. "I am a doctor, a neurosurgeon, a man, and I'm black. And somehow, in this country, that last word tends to outweigh the first three." A pause, not for drama, But because sometimes silence says more than declarations. I was called into the ICU to save a child, and I did what I was trained to do, what I've done for years, what this hospital hired me to do. But the moment I walked in, I wasn't seen as a doctor. A white nurse screamed. Security was called. My credentials were questioned, my intentions doubted, all before I even touched the patient. A woman in the second row shifted in her seat. Malik didn't flinch. He scanned the room slowly, measured, intentional. This isn't a story about one nurse. It's not even about one hospital. It's about a system that sees us, Black professionals, as potential problems before we're ever allowed to be seen as the solution. A system where saving a life isn't enough to protect you from suspicion, where doing your job might get you suspended, not because of what you did, but because of how you looked while doing it. He let the words hang, and then, almost gently, I'm not angry. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of having to prove I'm safe before I'm allowed to be skilled. I'm tired of being the first in and the last believed. His eyes dropped for just a moment, not from shame, but from the weight of carrying a truth too heavy for most boardrooms. I'm not a victim, and I'm no hero either. I'm a man who did his job, and if I hadn't, that child would be dead. But instead of thanks, I was put under investigation. He straightened. Not a single sound in the room. And you know what's worse? This wasn't some fluke. This wasn't a tragic, one-time misunderstanding. This is the norm, quiet, undefended, woven into protocols and hallway glances and workplace gossip. And we're done being silent. I'm done being silent. He stepped back from the microphone. Not because he had nothing left to say, but because what needed saying had already landed. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't need it. After the conference, Malik didn't go home. He didn't need solitude or congratulatory texts. He needed to return to the place where it had all started. Luca's room, the ICU, room 12C. The door that, just days before, had almost become a dividing line between life and death. Not for medical reasons, but for reasons spelled out in skin tone and suspicion. Inside, Walter Harding stood. When Malik entered, Walter stood up, respectful, not in a performative way, but like a man greeting the person who saved his child. Dr. Evans, Walter said. No need, Malik interrupted gently. I just came to see how he's doing. He's been asking about you. Every hour. From the bed came a small, hoarse voice. Doctor? Evans? Luca was propped up slightly, IV in his arm, hair tousled but eyes alert. You came back. They're not mad at you anymore? Malik sat down at the edge of the bed. His face softened. It doesn't matter who's mad, he said. What matters is who's still breathing. And you're breathing, champ. Luca nodded. You're my hero. Malik smiled, slow. I was just in the right place. And I didn't walk away. Across the hospital in a quiet admin office, Julianne Harding stared at her computer screen. An email blinked back at her. Bolded subject line. Notice of disciplinary review. She read it, closed the laptop, sat still. An hour later, she submitted her resignation. No press, no comment. Because staying would have meant learning how to be silent in the presence of those she once believed were beneath her. And Malik? He walked through the hospital corridor one more time. Heads turned. Some nodded. Others looked away. But for the first time, he didn't care. He didn't need their comfort. He had truth, and that was louder than applause. 3 weeks had passed. 21 long days. Long enough for the headlines to quiet down, for the press to chase another fire. Long enough for hospitals across the country to go right back to their default setting. Don't ask, don't change. In most places, white nurses still clutched their purses a little tighter when a large Black man stepped into the elevator. Administrators still whispered behind half-open office doors when someone from the wrong neighborhood walked confidently down a sterile corridor. Things hadn't changed, not really, except in one place, at one hospital. There, someone finally stood up and said, "Enough." Dr. Malik Evans now sat in a corner office with wide windows that looked out over the downtown skyline. The same skyline that once felt miles above him. Symbolic, really. The system had given him a view, not as a case study, not as a cautionary tale, but as someone who could now observe the machine from the inside and, more importantly, change it. The plaque on the door read, Director of Bias, Response, and Equity Protocols. Now sure, the title sounded like a compromise. A bureaucratic love child between corporate cowardice and just enough courage to pretend they cared. But damn it, it existed. And it existed because of him. The day it all became official, the hospital hosted a quiet briefing. No cameras, no press, just a conference room with 20 chairs. an old coffee machine wheezing out bitter roast, and donuts so sugary you could feel your glucose spike by the first sniff. Dr. Grayson stepped up first. His speech tiptoed like he was crossing a minefield. "We've made several decisions," he said, scanning the room filled with physicians, nurses, interns, and a handful of black staffers who sat with their hands in their laps, their posture protective, like they knew too well what these meetings usually led to. "There's a new protocol, a new department, and an official apology." Silence. Then he turned toward the door. Malik walked in. He didn't carry notes, didn't dress for theater, just walked in as himself. "I won't say much," he began, his voice steady, sharp, "because we all already know what happened. And because this room is full of people smart enough to understand, you are not victims, you're witnesses." He let that sit. His eyes scanned the row. No sign of Julianne. Word was she'd moved to Florida. Something about taking care of a sick aunt. Others whispered she just couldn't face the shame. Some said she left because deep down, she knew nobody here was going to look at her the same way again. Not after what she did or what she didn't do. "This incident became an example," Malik continued, "not just of how bias kills, but how it can be exposed if someone refuses to be quiet. I stayed quiet for too long. I watched doors close for people who look like me. I watched us get told to wait our turn, to ease up, to not intimidate with our knowledge or our presence." He looked around again, not with accusation, but with clarity. "That ends here." Later that night, Malik sat on the rooftop of his apartment, same folding chair he fixed himself a year ago, back when silence still felt safer than the fight. A glass sat beside him, filled with nothing but ice and lemon slices. No whiskey, no wine, just quiet, clean. He let the wind touch his face. He thought about how it all really started, not with Julianne, not with Luca's room. No, it began back in residency, back when the head surgeon pulled him aside one night and said, "Evans, you're good, damn good. But don't come off too confident. You scare people." Scare people. He remembered the first time he felt that internal pressure to shrink himself, to be just assertive enough, but not too loud, to be brilliant, but never threatening, to never be too black. Just safe, just acceptable. But that phase, that version of Malik, was done. A week after the chaos settled, he got a call from the National Association for Hospital Reform. They wanted him to speak at their annual roundtable on racial equity in healthcare. He agreed, but only under one condition. "I'm not going to talk about inclusivity," he told them. "That word's been diluted to the point of meaning nothing. I'll talk about accountability, and if that makes some folks uncomfortable, then we're finally headed in the right direction." Back at the hospital, young Luca Harding had made a full recovery, and when he got home, his first trip wasn't to a toy store or amusement park. It was back to the hospital, this time holding his father's hand, and in his other hand, a drawing. "I made this for you, Doctor. Evans," he said, holding it up proudly. "You've got a cape, because superheroes wear capes." Malik took the paper. On it, a hand-drawn version of himself stood at a child's bedside. The words at the bottom, scrawled in bright marker, read, "He wasn't scared. He saved me." He didn't cry. He just hung that drawing on the wall of his new department, right in the hallway, right where everyone had to pass it, and under it, a plaque. "This is the reason. No one hunted Julianne. No one trashed her on the news. No viral takedowns. No revenge. Just a quiet resignation. A system that finally looked itself in the mirror and said, this can't happen again. Because retribution? That's short-term. Change? That's permanent." Malik no longer apologized for being who he was, and if someone tried to minimize what had happened, called it a misunderstanding or an incident, he had a simple reply. A misunderstanding is when you put sugar in the salt jar. When people see your presence as a threat before they see your skill, that's a system. And I'm inside it now, with a magnifying glass. On the final page of the hospital's monthly bulletin, a new column appeared. Title, "When Fear Becomes Policy, Patients Die," by Dr. Malik Evans. The first sentence read, "My name is Malik Evans. I am a doctor. I am alive. I was nearly lost, not to illness, but to the fact that I was too much myself in a system that wanted me smaller. But not anymore. I am not alone." And here's what mattered most. He didn't become a hero at the end. He'd been one the whole time. It just took the world too long to say it out loud. And you, reading this right now, this story isn't about miracles. It's about choices. It's about courage. Maybe tomorrow you'll be the one standing at someone's bedside or outside a door the system tells you not to enter. Here's what you need to remember. Don't wait for permission. Walk in and do what's right.